West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it. So what is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out. I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there.
Ivy League educated 40-year veteran. Those on the right didn't take kindly to the Joint Chiefs' rebuke of Republican attacks on critical race theory. General Milley's remarks elicited this attack on Fox News tonight.
Mark Milley is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He didn't get that job because he's brilliant or because he's brave or because the people who know him respect him. He is not, and they definitely don't. Milley got the job because he is obsequious. He knows who to suck up to, and he's more than happy to do it. Feed him a script, and he will read it. Hard to believe that man wears a uniform. He's that unimpressive. Notice he never defined white rage, and we should know what it is. What is white rage? He's not just a pig, he's stupid.
With us to talk about what we've just witnessed is General Barry McCaffrey, decorated combat veteran of Vietnam, former battlefield commander in the Persian Gulf, former cabinet member, former member of the National Security Council. He retired, by the way, as a four-star general in the U.S. Army. General, for the civilians watching you and me tonight, please let them know what they should know about your friend and your fellow four-star General Milley.
Well, you know, I've known Mark Milley since he was a one-star in Afghanistan. I watched him in combat. I've been very closely associated with him over the years. It is my objective view that he's one of the most effective combat leaders we've had since World War II. He actually is brilliant. He's a Princeton grad, world-class athlete at Princeton, hockey player. He is incredibly brave. He was involved in shootouts in downtown Sadr City, armed with a pistol. He actually is widely respected in the armed forces. He spent a good bit of his Army career, military career, in combat. So, you know, that Fox TV interview is like the world turned upside down. I was very proud of him. He was very direct. And by the way, he's one of the bluntest people I've seen in uniform. He does not suffer fools lightly. And he and Secretary Austin, I think, did a remarkable job in just speaking directly to the challenge. We do have institutional racism baked into America's DNA. We do have to address it. For God's sakes, we got 8 Army posts named after Confederate generals who fought to preserve slavery. So we got to get into this subject. We will work it out. In many ways, the armed forces is the least racist institution in this country. But we got a long way to go, and Mark Milley's the guy to help us get there.
General, in my experience, and I defer to yours, Fox News is on the lion's share of the televisions in the mess halls, ready rooms, and lounges in bases, foreign and domestic. What would it do to the ranks to hear a Fox News anchor call the chairman of the Joint Chiefs a pig and stupid?
Well, it's a terrible gesture to make on the part of anybody about a public servant, never mind one of Mark Milley's dedication and talent. Look, I've never bought into the notion that the armed forces is rife with extremism because they're watching Fox TV. I don't believe that at all. 40% of the armed forces are minorities of one sort or another. They're basically, it's an apolitical institution. Certainly the officer corps is. They will not tell you who they voted for. They're prohibited by law from all sorts of actions. So I think that the country ought to have a lot of confidence that if you go to an infantry battalion in the 82nd Airborne Division or a Marine battalion at Quantico, you're going to find dedicated people. 60,000 killed and wounded in the war on terror fighting to protect this country. So it's a terrible insult to attack these people who are out there trying to protect America.
There's also this. Let me play this clip for you. This was Fox News last evening.
The idea that we are sending our tax dollars to this military to an attempt to weed out so-called extremists, which just means conservative evangelical, as far as I can tell. We're paying for that? Why is Congress not saying we're not going to give you a penny until all of this is eradicated from the military budget? Nothing. This is my offer to you. Nothing. That's what I would say.
So, General, how will that message land to the forward deployed who owe everything they have to the Home Office at the Pentagon? How does that comment strike you?
It's sheer twaddle. It doesn't mean anything. I find this hard to believe that somebody of obvious intelligence and experience would make that kind of a statement. The defense of the American people is the primary responsibility of Congress under Article 1 of the Constitution. The armed forces are the most powerful single force on the face of the earth, 2.1 million men and women. And they're prepared to defend America both internally and externally from those who would threaten the Constitution. We got to respect them. We're making our re-enlistment quotas. We're attracting some of the best top 20% of American youth into our ranks. We do have to guard against extremists in the force. We got to keep the military people with badges and guns and uniforms need to be carefully observed by the authorities. So, that whole interview there is just the stuff of twits.
It is Friday, the 25th of June of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, at least those of us here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We made it to Friday, and it looks like we have a bipartisan infrastructure plan that will probably, there's no probable about it, it will be decimated and thrown into the graveyard where democracy goes to die by the Grim Reaper, Mitch McConnell. So he's already talked about it. It's a socialist wish list. Fixing bridges, making sure that there's enough building inspectors out there that won't get bought off when the mob cement is being used on property that settles over time. Now, I was a little curious about settling here, because you know what we're talking about. We're talking about the building collapse in Surfside, is that it? Ocean City? The Florida place that fell to the ground. There had been an academic study done by a university, or at least affiliated with a university there in Florida, for decades. And the results is that they had noticed that that site had been settling as much as several centimeters a year. Now, we don't know if that was the cause of it, how long it had not been settling, shall we say. We can't extrapolate necessarily that it had been sinking that much every year. But I was curious, why was that study not made public? You're not supposed to teach critical structural engineering in Florida, even back in the 90s? What the hell? Well, they did have the electric chair then, so, it says everything you need to know. When I was playing with Cottonmouth, we actually considered not playing in Florida because they had the electric chair, not because we thought that we would take part in it, but the idea of playing in a state that had the electric chair seemed gruesome to us. But you know how life is. You're on the road. Okay, well, Florida. That incident, I think, is emblematic of something that is rotten about America. I mentioned yesterday that it took almost an act of Congress. In fact, I think it was, to get Florida to make a building code or a requirement that builders had to tie down roofs because they would fly away in hurricanes. And they've been flying away in hurricanes for how long? Forever. Until they were finally told, these little brackets don't cost that much. If you think it's going to, affect your costs, pass it on. People will pay, the value of the property goes up the more you make it safe. I don't know why people think that they can cut corners and make money. Now, maybe in Florida, it doesn't come back to bite you in the ass when you've built a defective structure in which people died. Maybe. Maybe that's why they don't teach critical structural engineering there, because that is a socialist takeover of America. All right. I'll tell you this. I'm not moving to Florida. And I don't know why anybody would want to build on a limestone cavern anyway. Jeez. Don't you know what's going to happen? Haven't you guys been watching the Discovery Channel? Or Mysteries of the Abandoned? Jeez. You sink a bunch of money into a sinkhole, you know what's going to happen. I went a long ways to get there now, didn't I? Yes, I did. Well, what else is going on in the world? I saw that a couple of Nevada counties are celebrating because they have joined the Constitutional Sheriffs of America, run by one Thomas Mack, who is an Oath Keeper. One of the originals. In fact, I think he started the Oath Keepers. Now, of course, we know the Oath Keepers as a terrorist organization, which it is. And the constitutional sheriffs, I would always call them Oath Keepers because they take an oath on their Reader's Digest-sized Constitution. It's not the actual Constitution. It's like just the Reader's Digest. The important parts to them. Okay, you don't need a well-regulated militia. Just, let people have guns. Among other things. And they take an oath. And essentially what that oath is, now some people call it anti-federal government. I call it anti-government. Anti-democracy, to be more exact. They take an oath in which they are the supreme decider in the land. Not the Supreme Court. Not the Congress. Definitely not the executive, especially if it's a black guy. Because that's why this guy Mack started this whole thing. I'm not letting that black guy tell us what to do. Jesus. We come from a grand history of slave patrols. We're going to let a former slave tell us what to do. What do you think this is? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's America, you bud. And you're a Nazi. And We're getting tired of Nazis doing what Nazis do. Which brings me to Tucker Carlson. You know, he's been a mouthpiece for the Nazis for quite a while, in spite of all those bone spurs in his brain. How is that possible? Well, some people might say he's just greedy. He's trying just in it for the money. Well, maybe. He comes from the Swanson TV dinner fortune. I don't think he really needs the Fox Channel money. Unless something happened in that family that we don't know about, like they disinherited him. I doubt it. So, here we are now. I was in a tete-a-tete with some people through the local Veterans Foreign War Hall, the VFW Hall here. The bartender, the VFW Hall here. Maybe it's the same in your area too. You know, they have a hard time keeping members because they usually die. You know? And there's all these anti-government types and secessionists. They're not going to be in the military except to learn how to, you know, do the things that they need to know to be able to kill people that they don't like when, you know, the Great Awakening happens. So, the VFW hall is open to the public, and they'd like people to come down, and, you know, we support them. My dad was in the military, and my stepdad was highly decorated from being part of the 442nd, and you know who they are. So the bartender came up with a rainbow cocktail for Pride Month. Oh, did she get hammered? The only thing we're proud about is the red, white, and blue, and that's all that should be in the VFW hall. By people that probably don't even go, right? But they're quick to talk about how they're just so supportive of the military, and you're a commie liberal, commie socialist, because, you know, you think that we should have equality in America. I think that's their argument. And, but they also watch Tucker Carlson. I wonder what kind of dissonance is occurring now. Well, they're brainwashed, and they're going to go with whatever their lizard brain is. That part of their lizard brain is activated, triggered, I think is the actual term, by the triggerers, like Tucker Carlson. That guy from OAN said, oh, yeah, we're just going to have to kill about 10,000 or so people who voted wrong. We got that going for us now, too. I like that. I kid. I don't like it. So Tucker Carlson is fomenting an insurrection, a violent act. How is that possible that he has that kind of platform? Well, we know. And I guess you could blame it on the fairness doctrine, I guess. But we might blame it on something else, a bit more insidious, because the fairness doctrine is just one part of a whole. And this attempt, this Nazi takeover of America has been long running. We called it something else back in the day. Oh, we can't call them Nazis. We're not extremists, as Ingram Ham says. Ooh, God, I was going to use a terrible term, and I'm not going to say it. It doesn't start with B, okay, or W. Okay, I don't go there. Or C. I don't go there. Harpy. She was harping about. Oh my God, how did I get that in there? That when they say they're going after white nationalist extremists, they just mean, like, you know, red-blooded American conservatives like us. Oh yeah, exactly. Nazi white nationalists like you. You're a good Republican, like the good Germans of old, and I'm going to flog that one too for a long time. Because I want it to get into people's heads when you say good Republican, it means just like the good Germans of old. The banality of evil at best. We're giving them the benefit of the doubt when we say it's banal. I think it's a lot more conscious than that, but they hide behind the banality. So, yeah, we need to purge the Nazis out of America, out of law enforcement. And I'm looking at you, constitutional sheriffs and counties that vote that Nazism in, because that's what it is. And just so you know, I mean, I'm using it as a term of convenience because I call the KKK Nazis also. I know that when you parse it down, the KKK and the Nazis are different. But, you know, they usually kind of get together. Usually. And have. This has been going on for a very long time. And I think the vast majority of us, because there is more of us than of them, I think we're getting pissed. All right, 500 arrested or charged in the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th. Now, I get numbers that are pumping more towards 900. Where'd those others go? Where's the other 300 or more? Where'd they go? Can't let them off. As has been mentioned before, if you don't do anything about an insurrection that failed, it was just practice. And you know what they say about practice? Okay, it's not the game. It was just practice. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, at the top, that was McCaffrey breaking it down about the attacks that Fox News is leveling upon General Mark Milley. Okay. Yeah, I mean, come on. I brought it up, too, and people have affirmed it. You know, the sentiment, affirmed the sentiment. Mark Milley was a world-class hockey player at Princeton. World-class. And Tucker Carlson couldn't make the squash team, probably even the croquet team at his prep school academy. You think this guy didn't do anything in sports? Even intramural inner-tube water polo league. You didn't even do that. Sit on your ass and throw a ball around. Floating in the pool. Couldn't even do that. So, Tucker, I think you need to STFU. Of course, we've been saying that for a long time, haven't we? Indeed we have. On the rest of the menu, St. Charles County agreed to pay $280,000 to 3 journalists who were tear-gassed in Ferguson, Missouri by the county SWAT team after Michael Brown's death in 2014. The wheels of justice move rather slow and sometimes, don't they? Amherst, Massachusetts has created a fund to pay reparations to black residents. It's about time. And Wendy Davis, Biden staffers, and volunteers filed a pair of lawsuits against Trump-trained members and Texas police over an attempted pit maneuver on the Biden bus last October. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a Ukrainian member of the notorious Fin7 cybercrime gang has been sentenced to 7 years in a United States federal prison. And European Union countries bordering Russia rejected a Franco-German plan to resume official meetings with Vladimir Putin. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Page at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link, that is right there by the social media scroll, I should mention. If you look across the page to the left, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will come across the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, if you could afford to send us the amount that you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, we are able to stretch those dollars, pay our bills, fly under the radar, and continue this resistance against the Nazi takeover of America. And worse. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be worse because they always know how. But all kidding aside, we have been paying our bills for over 10 years now. And that has allowed us to have this continuous 24/7, 365 resistance radio. Thank you for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended. Oh, so many years ago. So many. Even before Scalia. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. And that's what the social media scroll I mentioned. Yeah, that's what happens. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and I'll tell you why. Because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on my at Justice Putnam Twitter account, so that you can see the actual show notes and links, because the reportage is there. The real reportage is there. Complete, by the way. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please, above all, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found. Get them. Okay, it's Friday, we just rambling along here. And this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The French 77s are virtually poured and ready for your virtual imbibing pleasure, so please do. This is out of the Associated Press by Jim Salter. 3 journalists with Al Jazeera who were tear-gassed during a protest in Ferguson, Missouri after Michael Brown's death in 2014 have settled a lawsuit with the county whose SWAT team fired the tear gas. St. Charles County agreed to pay $280,000, according to the law firm Lathrop GPM, which represented the journalists. The St. Louis suburb of Ferguson became a focal point for the racial injustice movement after 18-year-old Brown, who was black, was fatally shot in the back by a white police officer during a street confrontation on August 9th, 2014. The officer, Darren Wilson, was not charged with a crime, but resigned in November of 2014. The shooting led to months of protests that drew media from around the world. The Al Jazeera America journalists were preparing for a live broadcast. Do you remember this? When the St. Charles County SWAT team officers fired tear gas toward them. Those officers were among several from the St. Louis region who were brought to Ferguson during the demonstrations. The law firm said video evidence contradicted police claims that tear gas was used in response to protesters throwing rocks and bottles. The firm said several videos showed that there were no protesters in the area and no one was throwing anything at the police. But you know what the cops did see? The TV lights, the camera lights. St. Charles County spokeswoman Mary Anger said a SWAT team deputy fired the canister to clear an area near what he did not know at the time was an Al Jazeera news crew. Sure. He didn't know they were Al Jazeera. He just knew they were a news crew. Let's be clear about that. She said the county and the deputy continue to maintain that the deputy exercised proper judgment in firing a single tear gas canister during a period of unprecedented public disorder in the region. Bernie Rose, the attorney for the journalists, said the award was much larger than other settlements involving journalists in Ferguson because those settlements were reached before George Floyd's death in Minneapolis in May of 2020, which was captured on video. The jury's verdict finding Chauvin guilty of George Floyd's murder represents a turning point in America. Jurors will no longer rely on law enforcement's version of what happened, especially when there is video that affirmatively disproves the police, Rhodes said in a news release. Associated Press staff bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Massachusetts town has created a fund to pay reparations to black residents as communities and institutions across the country look to atone for slavery, discrimination, and past wrongs amid the nation's ongoing racial reckoning. The Amherst Town Council voted 12-1 in favor of establishing the fund and requiring a 2/3 vote of the council to authorize any spending from it. Michelle Miller, who co-founded Reparations for Amherst, a local advocacy group that pushed for the measure, told the local paper, which is the Daily Hampshire Gazette, that the fund sets the foundation for providing equity in the college town, which is located some 90 miles from Boston. Miller and other proponents have cited restrictive housing policies that prevented black families from purchasing homes in desirable parts of town. Black people were also shut out of jobs and educational opportunities at UMass Amherst, one of the state's largest and most prominent institutions. As a result, the median income for Amherst white families is more than 2 times that of black families, and more than half of its black population lives below the poverty line. Amherst is among hundreds of communities and organizations across the country seeking to provide reparations to black people, from the state of California to cities like Providence, Rhode Island, religious denominations like the Episcopal Church, and prominent colleges like Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Amherst advocates have cited Evanston, Illinois, which became the first American city to pay reparations last month, as a model for their efforts. That program uses marijuana tax revenues to give eligible black residents $25,000 housing grants for down payments, repairs, or existing mortgages. The council also approved creating the African Heritage Reparations Assembly to develop the town's reparations plan by October 31st. It will be made up of 6 black residents and 1 representative from Reparations for Amherst. Joseph Axe of Reuters brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Several people who were traveling last October on a campaign bus for Democratic President Joe Biden that was surrounded by supporters of Donald Trump on a Texas highway filed a pair of federal lawsuits over the incident. One lawsuit, which named more than a half dozen members of the Trump train as defendants, accused Trump supporters of violating the Ku Klux Klan Act, an 1871 law named after the violent white supremacist organization and intended to prohibit groups from engaging in voter intimidation. The second lawsuit claims Public Safety Director in San Marcos, Chase Stapp, and several unnamed local law enforcement officers failed to provide emergency assistance as Trump backers played a, quote, madcap game of highway chicken, end quote, swerving within inches of the bus and sideswiping one staffer's vehicle. It looked like a pit maneuver to me, and they wanted to do it with the bus. Video footage taken on October 31st of 2020 showed pickup trucks and SUVs bearing Trump flags surrounding the Biden bus along Interstate 35 between San Antonio and Austin. At the time, the Biden campaign said the caravan attempted to force the bus off the road, putting staffers and volunteers at risk. The incident gained national headlines when Trump tweeted a video of the incident a day later with the message, "I love Texas." The FBI in San Antonio said last November it had opened an inquiry into the matter. A spokesperson for the agency said there was no update on the investigation when asked on Thursday yesterday, and declined to comment further, which means they're looking into it. A San Marcos spokesperson declined to comment on behalf of Stapp, the city, and police department, citing pending litigation because they've just been sued. The plaintiffs include Wendy Davis, a former Texas state senator who unsuccessfully ran for governor in 2014. The lawsuits were brought by Protect Democracy, a nonpartisan group whose mission is to defend against authoritarian threats, the Texas Civil Rights Project, and the law firm Wilkie, Farr, and Gallagher. The lawsuits are seeking unspecified damages. Hit them in the pocketbook. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and boy is it hot. And we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hi, and welcome to COVID Quickly, a Scientific American podcast series.
This is your fast-track update on the COVID pandemic. We bring you up to speed on the science behind the most urgent questions about the virus and the disease. We demystify the research and help you understand what it really means.
I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
And we're Scientific American's senior health editors. Today, we're talking about the danger of the Delta variant.
And the patchwork vaccine effort around the world.
And lottery tickets or beers for a shot in the U.S. The latest virus variant to grab headlines is called Delta. Why are scientists particularly concerned about it, Josh?
Because it's more transmissible, and it seems to be putting more people in the hospital, Tanya. And it's on the rise all around the globe. Delta was first spotted in India and spread quickly to 74 countries. In England, it accounts for 90% of new cases, taking over from the version called Alpha. It's got a bunch of mutations that seem to help it get inside human cells and evade antibodies that hunt for it. Researchers at Public Health England found the chances of people passing Delta around their households were 64% higher than with Alpha. That's a big jump.
England had started opening up more recently, too. Couldn't that have also led to more infections, in addition to some feature of the variant itself?
Yeah, there's stuff going on that can heighten the Delta numbers. People started traveling and businesses and restaurants were opening. But the bottom line here is there's a steep climb in Delta cases. And Delta appears to send twice as many people to the hospital as Alpha does. That's severe illness, such as being unable to breathe. A lot of these people are younger, under age 30, according to research in the medical journal The Lancet. Now, this isn't all doom. Even with Delta, vaccines keep people safe. Health records in Scotland show 2 shots of the Pfizer vaccine blocked Delta infection in 80% of people. Both the Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines kept practically everyone who got those shots out of the hospital, early data from England show. So what's this all mean? Already in the US, Delta accounts for 10% of infections. So it's coming. With summer reopenings and people mingling, unvaccinated people could get Delta during the next few months, setting up an ugly fall. Getting vaccinated, the numbers show, is the best route to keeping infections down and getting life closer to normal. More than half of the adult U.S. population has been fully vaccinated now. What's the situation like in other countries?
So far, most of the vaccines have gone to the wealthiest countries. In many low-income countries, less than 1% of people have gotten a single dose. An international effort called COVAX was supposed to fill this gap. Its goal was to distribute 2 billion vaccine doses by the end of this year. But as freelance contributor Sarah Reardon reported for us earlier this week, COVAX is far behind where it needs to be. A big part of the problem is that wealthy countries bought up all the vaccine doses before many vaccines were even approved. COVAX says part of the delay was because it lacked enough funding early on to secure those doses. Even when vaccines are available, they may be perceived as less effective or less safe than the vaccines available in richer countries. For example, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, 1.7 million doses of AstraZeneca's vaccine sat idle while European drug regulators weighed the risk of blood clots. By the time the vaccines were cleared for use, they were about to expire, and many were shipped elsewhere. Even if COVAX reaches its goal, it would still only vaccinate 20% of every country's population. So many countries have been forced to negotiate their own deals with vaccine makers as well. There is some good news. Wealthy countries recently pledged a total of 870 million vaccines to COVAX, half of them by the end of this year. But that still leaves a long way to go.
Clearly, vaccination is a life-saving idea. But in the U.S., it's been tough persuading some people to get these shots. Now, states and businesses are using creative lures to get folks to roll up their sleeves, and you just wrote about some free stuff people can get. What kinds of rewards?
Well, several states, including Ohio, California, and New York, have created lotteries with prizes ranging up to $1 million or more for people who've gotten vaccinated. Some states are also offering vaccinated teenagers the chance to win scholarships to state colleges and universities. Other states are trying more unusual approaches. West Virginia is raffling off rifles and shotguns. Washington State is letting marijuana dispensaries give out free joints. And New Jersey and Connecticut have been giving away free beer. These offers may not last forever, so if you've just gotten vaccinated, check for updates. These kinds of incentives work, experts say. A survey of unvaccinated people found that offering a cash reward or saying they wouldn't need to wear masks anymore made people more likely to say they would get a shot. And if the end result means more vaccinated people, that's a good thing. Now you're up to speed. Thanks for joining us.
Come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of COVID Quickly. And check out Siam.com for updated and in-depth COVID news.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Those in the know say that we the people should forget any progressive fantasy that, at long last, Washington might finally produce the kind of bold FDR-style agenda that America needs. They smugly lecture us that recalcitrant Republicans in Congress, not to mention a swarm of corporate lobbyists, are opposed to progressive change, so who would get it passed? Here's an idea. Try the people themselves. Those in the know don't seem to know it, or don't want us to know it, but big majorities across grassroots America are strongly in favor of the fundamental changes that Washington elites are rejecting. For example, 2/3 of America, including a majority of moderate Republicans, say yes to doubling the minimum wage. 72% of the people, including 46% of professed Republicans, shout their approval for Medicare for all. 8 out of 10 Americans, including strong majorities of Republicans, support a paid family leave program like every other developed nation provides for their people. What about increasing taxes on the rich, expanding Medicaid for poor families, raising teacher pay, spending more for early childhood education? Yes, 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 say majorities, not just in blue states, but also in GOP strongholds like Idaho, Nebraska, and Utah. These are not just poll numbers, but solid ideas embraced last year by a broad cross-section of voters in ballot elections across the country. For example, Florida voters enacted a constitutional initiative to up the state's minimum pay to $15, with yeas topping nays by a whopping margin of more than 20 points, making it even more popular than either Trump or Biden. This is Jim Hightower saying, instead of fearing the people, Democratic leaders need to get out of Washington and join the people. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, now live streaming on Facebook from the Chat and Chew Cafe. So grab a libation, pull up a virtual chair, and join our freewheeling conversations with political mavericks, musical agitators, and kick-ass grassroots groups. The Lowdown Happy Hour will connect you to good trouble activists who are building people power across America. Get the Lowdown at hightowerlowdown.org.
Why is critical race theory in the political crosshairs? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Critical race theory isn't new. It developed as an intellectual movement by legal scholars beginning in the 1970s, and since then has been embraced by other disciplines. Critical race theory, in broad brushstrokes, focuses on race as a social and historical reality, and racism not so much as individual acts of prejudice, but rather as part of our history and institutions, significantly aided and abetted and institutionalized by law. For example, the United States Constitution counted African American slaves as 3/5 of a person. After the Civil War, the Southern states enacted the Black Codes, intended to perpetuate slavery in a slightly different form. Critics claim that critical race theory is unpatriotic and anti-American, and that it's divisive because it highlights how people of different races have been treated differently throughout the country's history. In 2021, Arkansas, Idaho, Iowa, Oklahoma, Florida, and Texas have banned teaching critical race theory in their schools, and many other states as well are considering similar proposals. Eradicating the history of slavery and racism from our consciousness, our schools, and our history, as if whitewashing the past will somehow better enable young people to better and more realistically face the future? Now there's a really bad theory. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1943. That was the day the Smith-Conley War Labor Disputes Act was passed. In the years before Taft-Hartley, it was considered the foremost slave labor bill. It gave the president the power to seize and operate war industries confronted with strikes or lockouts interfering with war production. It also criminalized any future strikes in seized plants with $5,000 fines and up to a year in prison. And it held unions in war-related industries liable for damages incurred if they failed to give 30-day strike notices. The law was passed just 4 days after miners struck in protest of a War Labor Board decision that denied all of their contract demands. Congress overrode President Roosevelt's veto in passing the act. But critics argued that FDR vetoed the bill over parts that did not go far enough to suppress strikes. President Roosevelt argued for a proposed amendment that would, quote, enable us to induct into military service all persons who engage in strikes, stoppages, or other interruptions of work in plants in possession of the United States. The bill effectively criminalized any worker that dared to defy the wartime no-strike pledge, even as wages and working conditions quickly deteriorated in the face of massive defense industry profits. Miners were outraged by threats of conscription and jail time if they dared to strike. United Mine Worker President John L. Lewis refused to comment on the act, but other United Mine Worker leaders lamented that the bill would hurt AFL and CIO unions. As far as the United Mine Workers were concerned, though, the bill wasn't worth the paper it was written on. The act expired in June of 1947. It was superseded by the detested Taft-Hartley Act. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 63 degrees Fahrenheit. Expecting a high under an excessive heat warning for our part of the state. Expecting a high of 101, though on some reflective sides of the mothership, it gets considerably hotter than that. And we will be partly cloudy, winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles. Clear skies overnight with lows in the mid to upper 60s. Let's hope it's more in the mid. Anyway, winds will be out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and then sunny skies tomorrow. Record high temperatures expected of about 107 to 110. And winds will be out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then on Sunday, we are expecting a high of 114 here in Rogue River proper. And as I mentioned, on the reflective side of the mothership, lots hotter. Okay. Take care wherever you are. If you're having temperatures that even approach a bit of that, please do. Grass pollen is very high here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region isn't too bad. It's good at 35 parts per million, though that daytime UV index remains very high at 9. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.02 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is down to 68%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world, and we know that affectionately as the Weather Underground. London is 70 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 68 and cloudy. Rome is 88 and sunny with an excessive heat warning that may impact critical infrastructure like their electric grid, so take care out there in Rome. Kyiv is 94 and fair. Kabul is 80 degrees and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 78 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 72 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 58 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 54 and cloudy with a heat warning of their own. And New York is a pleasant 70 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Raphael Sauter of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. A Ukrainian hacker was sentenced to 7 years in prison for his role in a notorious cybercrime group that stole millions of credit and debit card details from across the United States. Andriy Kolpakov, age 33, was also ordered to pay $2.5 million in restitution after pleading guilty to one count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and one count of conspiracy to commit computer hacking. Kolpakov's lawyer, Vadim Glozman, said his client was disappointed with the sentence but respected the judge's decision. He said his client, who has already spent 3 years in custody after being nabbed by police in Spain in 2018, planned to return to Ukraine after serving out the remainder of his sentence. Kolpakov was sentenced in the Western District of Washington. Glozman said that his client was currently in custody in Washington State. Kolpakov's gang, dubbed Fin 7, is among the most prolific cybercriminal enterprises in existence. A memo drawn up by U.S. prosecutors said that no hacking group epitomizes the industrialization of cybercrime better, alleging that the gang had over 70 people organized into discrete departments and teams, including a unit devoted to crafting malicious software and another unit composed of hackers who exploited victims' machines. For cover, Fin 7 masqueraded a cybersecurity company called Combi Security, which claimed to be involved in penetration testing. Prosecutors say Kolpakov worked for Fin 7 from at least April of 2016 until his arrest in June of 2018, and rose to become a mid-level manager, directing a small team of hackers tasked with breaching victims' computer systems and training new recruits to use Fin 7's malicious tools.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Lauren Cook of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. European Union countries bordering Russia rejected a Franco-German plan to resume official meetings with Russian President Vladimir Putin, with one leader likening the move to an attempt to talk a bear out of stealing honey. A Russian bear? In a statement in the early hours today, EU leaders said only that they will explore formats and conditionalities of dialogue with Russia. There was no mention of any high-level meetings or plans for a summit with Putin. The EU is deeply divided in its approach to Moscow. Russia is the EU's biggest natural gas supplier and plays a key role in a series of international conflicts and issues linked to Europe's strategic interests, including the Iran nuclear deal and conflicts in Syria and Libya. European heavyweight Germany has strong economic interests there, notably the Nord Stream 2 undersea pipeline project, and a number of countries, including France, are reluctant to continue waging a sanctions battle with Russia, including over the poisoning of opposition leader Alexei Navalny. The EU is concerned that Putin is turning increasingly authoritarian, and wants to distance himself from the West, but both the 27-nation trading bloc and the NATO military alliance are struggling to bring Russia to the table. U.S. President Joe Biden's meeting with Putin this month was a rare exception. The other two Baltic states, Estonia and Latvia, are also deeply concerned about reaching out to Moscow when the Minsk agreements meant to bring peace to Ukraine, whose Crimean Peninsula Russia annexed in 2014, are still not being respected. Conflicts still simmer in eastern Ukraine with Russia-backed separatists. French President Emmanuel Macron said Europe cannot simply tackle its problems with Russia on a case-by-case basis by continually imposing sanctions or other measures. We cannot continue without dialogue. We have to talk. In Berlin, German Chancellor Angela Merkel told lawmakers that the events of recent months, not just in Germany, have clearly shown that it's not enough if we react to the multitude of Russian provocations in an uncoordinated way. Instead, we have to create mechanisms to respond in a common and unified way to provocations, to what she described as hybrid attacks by Russia. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up on Monday for River City Hash Monday. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.